Good evening. The hour of 6:30 p.m. having arrived, I will call to order this regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This meeting is being broadcast live on Spectrum Channel 1302. Anyone wishing to view a copy of the agenda and supporting materials will find it on the city website. To receive electronic copies of future agenda packets, please go to the home page and subscribe to the city meetings email list. The public and other Zoning Board of Adjustment members will be recognized to ask questions and make comments on the agenda item under discussion. After being recognized, all remarks are to be made through the chair. Anyone who wishes to address the board is asked to go to one of the microphones in the room and identify themselves by name and address prior to speaking. Begin with an introduction of the board members, beginning with myself, Josh Gorman.
Jane Taylor.
Richard Clough. Michael Welsh.
Moving on to the minutes from March 7th. Any commentary on that?
I'll move to accept.
Great. We have a motion from Michael Welsh. We have a second from Attorney Taylor. All of those in favor? It's unanimous, 4-0. And now we move on to unfinished business. John, we got anything on tap?
We don't have anything for tonight, Mr.
Great.
Chair.
Okay, thank you. At this time, then, I will move on to the hearing on the agenda for tonight. We do have ZBA 22-05, where the petitioner, Aaron Wazell of 9 White Pine Way in Berwick, Maine, is requesting a variance for property located at 0 West Street. Tax map number 577-025-0000000. That is in the Commerce District, and it's owned by Judy L. Williams of Keene. The petitioner requests a variance to permit a building lot consisting of 9,738 square feet in the Commerce District, where 15,000 square feet is required per Chapter 100, Article 512 of the zoning regulations. At this point, I'll call on city staff. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you stated, this property, and as you can see on your screens and/or on the plot plan that Mr. Fipper just put up, this is on West Street, right next door to where the old Sunoco station, and if anybody remembers or knows where that's at, or right across from the Keene Inn and the I think it's the dollar store. I forget the name of the retail right across the street. Just to give the board a little bit of background, this was a non-conforming use as well as a non-conforming lot. Previously, it had a two-family home on it, which is not a permitted use within the Commerce District. That structure was demolished in late 2018. Hence now we have a vacant lot right on West Street that is in the Commerce District. Commerce District does require 15,000 square feet, so it is still, while the non-conforming use is gone, the lot itself is still non-conforming as far as lot size. And I'll certainly let the applicant speak. I know there's a proposal in front of the planning board, if this variance were granted, that would go forward to the next planning board for a proposed site development. And they meet all the other, that proposed development meets all the other zoning as far as setback, parking, all of those other requirements. So they are before you tonight for the lot size variance.
Great. Thank you, John. Any questions? Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Mr. Rogers, with the changes to the land development code, was the lot size requirement the same under the old code? Was that one of the things that did not change?
That would be correct, yeah. The lot sizes did not change in the Commerce District with the new LDC. That stayed the same.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, John. This time we'll welcome Mr. Fippard. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Jim Fippard, Brickstone Land Use Consultants. I'm speaking on behalf of the property owner, Judy Williams, and also the applicant, Aaron Wiswell. This is an existing property, as John explained, located on the south side of West Street. It's outlined in red on the plan that I have at the easel here. And this is a block of properties that are all zoned commerce. I'm not sure when it got zoned commerce, but probably in the 1970s. But between Pearl Street and the Asheville River, there are 27 lots here. I'm sorry, there are 33 existing lots here, and 27 of them are all non-conforming due to lot size. So that's an indication that all these lots were created many, many years prior to the zoning that we have in place today. So this is a legal non-conforming lot. By that I mean it was a lot that was created back in the early 1900s. The duplex that used to exist on that lot was built in the 1920s. In fact, my dad used to live in one of those units in the 1940s when he was in the Army until he got shipped overseas. But so it was there for many, many years before it was torn down. John said late 2018. I think it was actually finished in February 2019. So the lots were legal at the time they were created. The lots were legal when the buildings were built on them. And as you can see, all of these lots have existing buildings on them. And if you look at the lot sizes, they became non-conforming when this area was zoned commerce. And it made sense to zone this area commerce because West Street is one of the busiest streets in the city of Keene, and the commerce district is very traffic dependent. So it tends to be vehicle sensitive, where they're generating high amounts of vehicle traffic to support the businesses. So I believe that that's how these became non-conforming lots. And then the zoning changed citywide a couple times since then, in the 1980s and the 1990s. So while I've been in this practice, I've watched a lot of properties become non-conforming. And as a result, I end up coming before this board to ask for permission to do different things on those properties. So this property, 9,738 square feet, is non-conforming because 15,000 square feet is the required minimum lot size in the Commerce District. So given the history of the property, and the Williams family purchased the property in 1956. So they've owned it a long, long time in this family. And the daughter inherited it. That's Judy, who I'm working for tonight, after her parents died. So it became non-conforming with all these changes in zoning. But when they purchased it, it was a legal lot with a building already on it, and the duplex was occupied for many years until it came in disrepair and was eventually torn down, removed from the site. So we need a variance to do anything on this lot. Because it's undersized, none of the listed permitted uses are allowed without a variance. There's just no way around it. So you're going to hear more about that when I get to criteria number 5 on your list. So the first criteria is granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. And I believe that's true because you look at this neighborhood, it's all developed lots. They all have existing buildings. Some are in commercial uses, some are in residential uses, some are office spaces, for example. Others are apartment buildings, and others are single family. But if you look at all the lot sizes on the plan before you, the lot we're working on is 0.23 acres. Every other lot going down Richardson Court, except for the lot at the end, is smaller in size. They're all occupied with single-family or two-family residences or offices. If you look at the lots in the next block, between Bridge Court and Richardson Court, every lot is smaller in size than the existing lot that we're asking for permission to build on. So the character of the neighborhood is very well established, and it's been this character for many, many years, for decades. Because these are all older homes and older buildings in this neighborhood, not new buildings that were built recently under the current codes. So allowing this lot to be developed, I believe, is in the public interest. Right now, it's a vacant lot, And as you know, vacant lots over time can become unkempt. They're not constantly mowed, they collect trash, they become a hangout. There's a lot of negative factors that go with vacant lots, so it's in the best public interest to allow these lots to be redeveloped, especially if it can be done in accordance with the latest zoning requirements. And on this property, it can. And you'll see in a few minutes, we're going to propose a commercial development on this property that meets all of the other zone dimensional requirements. It meets the setbacks, meets the lot coverage, meets the pavement setbacks. Everything complies to what our commercial district requires, except for the lot size. So that lot size is the critical component. Without a variance, they can't do anything on this lot, regardless of what the uses are that are proposed. So I think it is in the public interest to allow this to be redeveloped in a manner consistent with the current zoning. It'll improve the property value on this lot and also the adjacent lots, because this won't be a vacant, unkempt property in the future. The second criteria, if the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. And the Commerce District is easy. The spirit of the ordinance in the Commerce District is to allow commercial development that's highly traffic dependent. So a location like this on West Street is the epitome of a commercial lot. It's the highest traffic counts in the city, the highest visibility for businesses. This is where they all want to locate. So the spirit of the ordinance would be to build a business, a new building on this property that can comply with the rest of the requirements in the Commerce District. And we can do that here. And I'll show you that in a minute. So I believe it does meet the spirit of the ordinance. The third criteria is substantial justice. And this is where you weigh the benefit to the public versus the benefit to the applicant. And there is no benefit to the public here to deny a variance, to allow this property to be utilized, what it's intended for. But there is certainly a benefit to the landowner to allow this property to be redeveloped as a commercial interest the way that our zoning calls for. So I think clearly it allows substantial justice. If the variance were granted, this is the fourth criteria, the values of surrounding property would not be diminished. And I believe that's true. As you look at all the properties in here, they're all developed. And this being the vacant lot, if we propose a development, and you're not voting on the plan I'm going to show you, this is just a concept plan for a business. This plan will go before the planning board if we get the variance we need. But this is just to show you that it can be developed, even though it's an undersized lot, in a manner that's permitted by zoning. So the applicant, Aaron Wiswell, owns several Aroma Joes throughout New England, and that's what he's proposing to build here. He was very excited when he found this lot because Aroma Joe's is a very small building. I don't know if you're familiar with them. We haven't had one in Keene recently. I think we had one several years ago in an existing building. But if you look at the new buildings, they're really very small in size. There's no inside seating. It's all, you can go to a walk-up window and place an order, or you can go to a drive-up window and place an order, pick up your order, and you leave the property. There's no outdoor seating, so it's entirely reliant upon public access through sidewalks or vehicle traffic into the site. So this is a narrow lot. It's undersized because it's less than 15,000 square feet. But with a one-way in, driveway, driving around the building, this is where you'd place an order, this is where you'd pick it up, and then exiting to West Street. So this is what we're proposing. This is about an 800 square foot building, but it meets the rear setbacks, the front setbacks, the side setbacks, the pavement setbacks, and it complies with lot coverage. So I would expect a plan like this would be approved at the planning board if we get the variance we need to allow this to go forward.
Mr. Fippard, if you don't mind, Attorney Taylor has a quick question.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm having a real hard time seeing the drawing. Is there any way you can bring it closer?
I certainly can.
Or, I didn't know if you had handouts or whatever, but it's, sorry about that. Yeah, that's a good distance.
So West Street is here at the top of the page. Okay, and then this is the old Sunoco station next door, and this is some type of medical office in this building, and then I think it's residential uses down Richardson Court. But this fits on the site, complies to the lot coverage that's allowed, meets the pavement setbacks, meets the building setbacks. So it complies to all the other requirements of the Commerce District.
If I may, Mr. Chair,
Except
we
for
just
the size of
we
it.
just have to have Mr. Pepper to the mic just for nothing else but a minute taker.
Yep,
So they-
great.
they can hear about that.
Yep. Thank you, Jim.
And for your purposes, this is just a concept, but it can support a commercial development is what I'm testifying to. And hopefully you'll recognize that in your decision. I don't believe the property values of surrounding properties would be diminished with this type of development. They will provide screening with solid fencing, with additional landscaping. So if you go to the property today, it's unmowed, it's unkempt, there's trash starting to accumulate. So this will prevent that from happening. It'll become a well-maintained property and a new business in the city of Keene. Number 5 is an unnecessary hardship. I think that there's a special condition that exists with this property that was created by the zone changes. So the city created these special conditions inadvertently when they changed the dimensional requirements for the Commerce District, or when they zoned this commerce. Because when the house was built and the property was lived in, initially it was all conforming and met all the zone requirements. So now this special condition exists, as it does for these other properties as well. And because nothing can be done on this property without a variance, I think that's a uniquely special condition.
Michael?
Excuse me, thank you. A quick question. The structure that was on the site prior, would it have been possible to make the claim that, I mean, it was on an undersized lot, but would it have been possible to also make the claim that it was also in compliance with all the necessary setbacks, or was it larger than the permissible setbacks on the lot?
Go ahead, John.
And Jim can certainly, he might have some information for it, but I can certainly probably put that the prior building probably did not meet setbacks.
That's my
Probably did not
guess.
meet the front setback. I'm questionable if it met the side setback on the east side. I think it met probably on the west side, but the east side, it probably didn't meet that. And I wouldn't believe that it met the front setback either, because it was very close to the sidewalk that was on West Street. Right.
Is it also accurate, John, that it's not, wouldn't have even been an allowed use in today's zoning code?
Correct, Mr. Chair, absolutely. It's a commerce district which at this point in time does not allow for, single-family or two-family homes. And hence why all the other properties Mr. Fipper did explain are, legal non-conforming at the moment.
Great.
And John is correct. The previous duplex was too close to the front line, too close to the east sideline, and the use was non-conforming because residential use is not a permitted use in the Commerce District. So there were several other zoning requirements that were non-conforming other than the size of the lot. So I believe that because of the zone changes over time, that special condition was created, and because this lot can serve no other purpose without a zoning variance, that's a pretty difficult situation. And a variance is required to allow any development of any kind on this lot. Proposed use is a reasonable one. The proposed use that we'll be proposing is the Aroma Joe's. I believe it's reasonable because it meets all the other zone dimensional requirements. We'll be going to planning board. We've done a professional traffic report. This type of use in particular, a drive-through coffee shop, relies entirely on the pass-by traffic on the street. So the traffic engineer estimates 90% of the vehicle trips are generated out of the traffic already driving on West Street. So people aren't leaving home and driving to Aroma Joe's just to get a cup of coffee. They're stopping on their way to work, or they're passing by doing other errands and other trips, and they see the coffee shop and pull in. That's what they rely on. We provided traffic data from several Aroma Joe's shops already in existence and prove that that's true everywhere that they've built these, and Mr. Wiswell owns several of them. So I think this is a reasonable use in this location. As I said, West Street is the highest traffic generation in the city, and it's a perfect spot for this type of use, relying on pass-by traffic. 5B, again, it's the same reasons. This is a property that became non-conforming due to zoning changes over the last 120 years. And where an older property existed that was legal at the time it was created, it's just unfair and unreasonable to the applicant or to the property owner not to be allowed a use for his property. And the zoning inadvertently took away those uses, therefore a variance is required. I'll be happy to answer your questions.
Any questions for Mr. Fibber? Doesn't look like it at the time, Jim, so I guess seeing no one in the public, I'm going to close this hearing, and if we need to reopen it, we will. So thank you. So I guess at this point, public hearing's closed. We can begin our deliberation, beginning with number 1, and that is that granting the variance would not be contrary to the public interest. Go ahead, Attorney Taylor.
Yeah, I have some real concerns with this. In part, and again, I'm not sure whether I'm addressing the unnecessary hardship or public interest and substantial justice. There's quite a lengthy series of, as you know, zoning laws in large part created for good or bad by our state Supreme Court. There's a long series of cases that began with something that Justice Souter wrote, but updated in 2006, 7, and another case I can't remember. But it basically says that I'm summarizing, just because a parcel can't be built on or whatever you want to do on it, if it's not different from all its surrounding properties, that doesn't make it unique. It's not distinguished from the other properties. And my concern here, when I talk about the public interest in the presentation under that particular one, says 33 existing lots with 27 of the lots non-conforming. That just indicates to me that this is not unique in its area. I'm also concerned with an additional high-traffic commercial use. I am familiar with Aroma Joe's, and they put out a very nice product. But the amount of traffic that's generated, it's already pretty much a nightmare on that. And I'm just concerned with how much of a public interest is the traffic that would be generated going through that site. Wanting to, first of all, stacking while they're waiting for coffee hours, especially at high traffic times, and then potentially adding another left-hand turn out of that particular site. I realize it's a traffic's a planning board issue, but I have real concerns that it would be in the public interest to add another potentially high traffic and traffic conflict site.
Anyone else?
Sorry it went on for so long.
No? Michael?
I think Attorney Taylor raises some really good points. And, the thought of making a left turn off the site is something that I would think twice about, often depending upon the time of day. One of the things that I'm hopeful about, and actually, my understanding is it is something that the planning board will look at fairly closely, and they will do so with reference to the traffic study that Mr. Fippard was mentioning. So I'm feeling a little better about that. And when it comes to the public interest, and contrariness to the public interest, I think about why we're looking at this proposal in the first place, and I think it's because the building was demolished. If it hadn't been demolished, then we would be looking at rebuilding an existing non-compliant structure. But I think it's very much in the public interest that the building was demolished and that situation is therefore with us. And I think this is the best solution to our situation of looking at new construction on this very otherwise difficult site. And it presents a pretty good argument for public interest.
Great. I guess I'll add to the commentary at this point. So I guess I look at it actually in the complete opposite direction of Attorney Taylor. When it comes to the traffic count, I think that it's my opinion that the traffic count already exists. I don't disagree that it is less than favorable to try and make a left-hand turn out of there, but the fact remains is that it is a lot, and it is entitled to some form of use. I think the courts would agree with that. Yet our zoning does not permit a use, so it's going to end up being something. And I think that this use probably has the least amount of, maybe not the least, but a very small amount of traffic increase. To Mr. Fippard's point, I don't think people are making it a destination. I think it's a drive-by activity so that it complements the already high, difficult to manage traffic count. And as far as the uniqueness, I agree with Attorney Taylor that it's not unique in its size, but I guess when it's the only one that's not used, that makes it unique. So by way of not allowing a use for it, you are separating it from everything else, and I think that is where the sort of injustice arises. So the fact that every other property that is similar has a use, and this one doesn't, I think makes this situation unique. Richard?
I know the city of Keene, West Street is on the 10-year plan for DOT, and a major reconfiguration has been projected, including a median down the middle, which would actually make it very limited access at very specific spots. And again, when we're talking 10-year plan, literally might be 10 years from now that they would actually do this construction. So it's still relatively early, but it has passed a few hurdles. If with that sort of thing potentially there, that would mitigate a lot of the turning issues. Because I totally agree that doing a left-hand turn into or out of that from the wrong lane or the wrong direction would definitely be a nightmare. I would never do it myself. But just being aware that it's actually an issue on the whole street. This is one of so many, the Dunkin' Donuts that's further down, Savings Bank of Walpole. Many times trying to pull in there, I've been like, I'm just waiting and waiting until you lose patience, which is, of course, not a very good thing either. So I can see the concerns.
I think the only one where you can't do it is Panera, which sometimes bothers me. I wish I could.
Yeah, they've got the curb cut, so you can only do right turns.
Yeah.
And there are times when, especially close to Starbucks, you want to be able to go the other way.
But I do agree that it exists all up and down the street, and there probably is a way to correct it, but it would involve a redesign of the street. I don't think that by eliminating this one use, you're coming anywhere near solving a problem, or by allowing the use, I don't think you're creating a new one. And I do think the size of the building is beneficial here. The fact that it's going to be small and doesn't offer sit down and all that, so it will be largely transient people just coming and going. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, my point is that it's a matter of degree, in that it's a already pretty terrible situation, and in my opinion, and from having to travel back and forth like the rest of us do, it would make it worse. It's not a matter of a building or a building size.
So I think we did cover a few of these criteria in that discussion, but I will just move on to number 2, and if anyone has any added thoughts, feel free. If the variance are granted, the spirit of the ordinance will be observed. Michael?
I'm convinced that the spirit of the ordinance, as the applicant has stated, is to encourage vehicular traffic and vehicular use, and this use is consistent with that, being drive-through, and so it seems very consistent with that.
I agree. Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, I can't cite you pages or chapter and verse, but, you know, that whole concept of increasing vehicular use is kind of against what the master plan has in it and becoming a more walkable city. So I'm not so sure it is within the spirit of the ordinance.
I think for me, the fact that it's a commerce zone and this is a commercial activity is a fair point, that it probably meets the spirit of the ordinance, other than the size of the lot. I don't think the use or I mean, at the end of the day, if the lot was bigger, we wouldn't be talking about how much traffic it was going to cause, or whether or not, I mean, and it is a commerce zone. I'm sure if they could make it bigger, they would. Number 3, granting the variance would do substantial justice. Anyone? Oh, Attorney Taylor, sorry.
Yeah, again, just to reiterate my prior comment, I think that it is a detriment to the public in that.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
No worries.
Reiterating my prior comments, I think it's a detriment to the public that outweighs the benefit to the property owner. Again, going back to the anticipated traffic use, and I'm not a traffic engineer, but I can't guarantee that it's, you know, people, that 90% of its traffic is going to be because people are already on West Street. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, I could certainly see the benefit to the owner or to the applicant on this. As far as detriment to the public, if measured by degree of compliance with the zoning ordinance, this is actually strikes me as more in compliance with the zoning ordinance on the whole than the vacant lot or than the lot as it used to be. So we're moving in a direction of more compliance, which one could argue is a direction of benefit to the public.
Great. Moving on to number 4, if the variance were granted, the value of surrounding properties would not be diminished. Real briefly, I think it's, strictly from a value standpoint, I think putting a finished property on the site, if anything, it will raise the value of surrounding sites. I mean, a vacant lot does not help surrounding values, and a newly constructed, properly planned development should raise values in a commerce zone. So I think it'll have a positive effect. Anyone else? Moving on to number 5, unnecessary hardship. Starting with 5A, that owing to special conditions on the property that distinguish from other properties in the area, denial of variance would result in unnecessary hardship because, 1, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purpose of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and that the proposed use is a reasonable one. Anyone? Attorney Taylor?
Yeah, just to reiterate and to cite to Garrison versus Henniker, which is a 2006 case, said to demonstrate unnecessary hardship, applicants must show that a zoning restriction as applied to their property interferes with the reasonable use considering the unique setting of the property in its environment. And then from a later case, that they must demonstrate that the proposed site is unique compared to surrounding lots. And I think as a threshold issue, this lot is clearly not unique in comparison to its surrounding lots as demonstrated by the applicant. Whether it's reasonable or not becomes, to me, a secondary inquiry, and I'm not absolutely sure that it is a reasonable use.
Go
I
ahead.
hate item 5. I find it difficult to wrap my head around every single time. But I do think, with regard to reasonableness, it's a permitted use, and so it strikes me as, and it's a way of making a permitted use, a small, tiny drive-through. And as I was trying to think about other uses, I can't imagine how you would locate any of the other permitted uses on a structure of that size on a lot of this sort. And so I'm convinced that it's reasonable, and that that part 1 is also satisfied.
Great. I do feel like some of my commentary earlier touched upon my stance for 5A. And then just on top of that, I'll add that I do believe the use is reasonable, given that if the lot were a few thousand square feet bigger, it could be built tomorrow. So on to B, explain how, if the criteria in subparagraph A are not established, an unnecessary hardship would be deemed to exist if and only if, owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish from other properties in the area, the property cannot be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, and a variance is therefore necessary to enable a reasonable use of it. When I get to 5B, any doubt I had about 5A, I have no struggle with 5B, since there is no use allowed in our zoning code. There's not a single use for this property without a variance, so I think it's safe to say that B is satisfied and that a variance would be necessary for anything rather than keeping it a vacant lot. So, Attorney Taylor?
My only point on that would be, I'm not convinced that that if this use was not allowed, that there wouldn't be another use that might be reasonable. So I can't say affirmatively to, just because of one proposal I don't believe would be reasonable, that no other reasonable use would be allowed.
But a variance would be required.
Yes.
Right. Any other commentary? Well, I guess then at this point, I'll call on someone for a motion. Michael? 2205.
Move to approve ZBA 2205.
Great. Do I have a second? A second from Richard. We have a motion to approve from Michael Welsh. We have a second from Richard Clough. So beginning with criteria number 1, now that I turned my page, we will start with, if the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. All in favor? 3. All opposed? 3 to 1. Number 2, if the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. Did I just read number 2? Or did I read number 1? Great. All right. So, number 2 it is, if the variance were granted, the spirit of the ordinance would be observed. All in favor? 3, 4 to nothing. It is unanimous. Granting the variance would do substantial justice. Number 3, all in favor? 3 to 1. 3 to 1. Number 4, if the variance were granted, the values of surrounding properties would not be diminished. All in favor? It's unanimous, 4 to 0. And on to number 5, starting with 5A, that owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish from other properties in the area, denial of variance would result in unnecessary hardship because 1, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public provision or purpose of this ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property, and that the proposed use is a reasonable one. All in favor? 3. All opposed? To 1. 3 to 1. So moving on to the final vote for ZBA 2205. All in favor? 3. All opposed? 1. 3 to 1. Thank you, Mr. Fippard.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
You too.
This time I'll ask staff if we have any new business.
Just one item, Mr. Chair, thank you. It's a reminder of the Spring 2022 Planning and Zoning Conference that is a free event. There's 2 days, 2 free half-day online conferences, Saturdays, April 30th and May 7th at 9 to 12. I did send out the email reminder, so you can go ahead and register yourselves if you'd like, because they are free.
Could you resend it?
I can.
I deleted it by accident.
No problem. No problem.
And they will also record it
Yes, yes, it will be recorded, so.
if you can't make it.
Yes,
Great.
thank you.
Anything else? All right. I guess then, closing it out. Thank you, guys. Yep, that's right.